And so today we're reading A Mystical Path Less Traveled, a Jungian Psychological Perspective by Jerry R. Wright, and Religious But Not Religious by Jason Smith, Living a Symbolic Life. And so I'm going to go to Jerry Wright first. And I'm on page 53 of his book. At the bottom of the page, journal, we do not need a new religion or a reformed or transformed version of current ones. The age of traditional religions has likely passed, and those that we still cling to will likely be relegated to the museums of our species' evolution. What we do need is a new attitude toward the mysterious life that we inhabit and to the mystery that we are. Some have called this a new religious attitude. I prefer to term the mystical attitude, which moves our imagination from the deep ruts of well-traveled religious roads to that have come to a dead end. I'm sorry, let me read that sentence again. It went across a page turn. I prefer to term the mystical attitude that moves our imagination from the deep ruts of well-traveled religious roads that have come to a dead end. A mystical attitude allows us and forces us to embrace aspects of ourselves that will promote more creative and more responsible living. For example, what if we could embrace the mystical perspective that each of us is a microcosm of what is wrong with the world, and its corollary, each of us is a microcosm of what is right with the world? Such a perspective would eliminate the dualistic notions of original sin and original blessing. A psychological mystical attitude acknowledges that we are the conduits through which both creative and destructive powers manifest. Furthermore, with the hard work of consciousness, we have a measure of choice about which capacities to incarnate. Again, what if we related to all others, both humans and more than human, with the mystical attitude, quote, and then in italics, while I am not you, neither am I other than you. If I then in parentheses, I am indebted to author and contemplative James Finley for this phrase, while I am not you, I am not other than you. Would the artificial divisions of species, genders, geographies, borders, and ideologies disappear? Would such an attitude allow us to live as an interconnected, interdependent web of being that both mystical knowledge and scientific knowledge validate? Okay, so there's a couple of issues here that very significantly Jerry Wright underlines. The first of these is we do not need a new religion. Okay, so at the time of Carl Jung's life, Carl Jung envisioned that there had to be a new religion, a changing of the gods, which is the astrological activity of moving from Pisces into Aquarius, and that we as human beings would be changed. And a lot has happened since then. First of all, while Carl Jung may have heard of mainframe computers by the time he died in 1961, he certainly wouldn't have heard of anything like the internet or PCs. PCs didn't come on the scene until 22 years later, 1983, really. And he would have had no concept of the connection that we've made through the internet. And so as a result of that, he was still working in the old paradigm. But now we've had enough time, 60 years, so that we see things that have vastly changed. I mean, just monumental changes. And one of those things is the internet, of course. So all of a sudden, all these brains that have been living in separate little silos and in separate countries around the world, all of us are connected now. And we're interacting in ways that nobody would have predicted. And the metaphor I see for that comes from Close Encounters of the Third Kind, the movie, where at the end, toward the end of the movie, the alien spacecraft lands in the desert near Devil's Tower, and they've set up basically an organ, like a church organ, at the landing pad. And so it produces sound, but it also connects via light. And throughout the movie, there has been a sound that has been heard all over the world that the aliens have been transmitting, which is bum, 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 bum. And so, so the organist, after the alien spacecraft comes down and it's hovering over the landing pad, the organist begins to play those 5 notes. And they're also transmitted behind him via light, or an idea of that. And what follows is an orchestral suite that begins very slow, just with the 5 notes, and over the course of the next 5 minutes, there becomes a monumental orchestral piece. And so today, or let's say in Jung's time, we were quite in separate silos with our brains, and nobody had heard a common theme, a common 5 notes, let's say. Some may have heard it, but others would have had no clue about it. And so when the internet connected up, all of a sudden we've had interactivity across the world with all our brains and all our smarts. And the result of that is that the world of 2021 is profoundly changed from the world of 1990. And, you know, in the days before the commercial internet got going, I remember when I was a young lawyer and I had children, what I wanted to have in my library was the great books. And there's a book series called The Great Books. And I actually bought one. I bought a set. And I just wanted to have access to all the knowledge of the world so I could connect it all up. And unfortunately, I divorced my wife and the mother of my children at about the same time, and the great books got left with them. But at some level, I didn't mind, because I wanted my daughters to be exposed to that set of great books. So that would have been in the mid 1980s when I came back from Japan, but I had wanted this set for maybe 15 to 20 years before that. And so in 1985, I had this break with my first wife, and she got the great books. So I was again cut off from all the great knowledge of the world. And that was 85. So then the commercial internet got going in 1995. And all of a sudden, instead of having to have the great books in your library, all of a sudden, everybody had access to all the information in the world. It didn't happen overnight, but let's say within the next decade, we all have access fairly inexpensively to all the great books and all other knowledge in the world, with the exception of government and company secrets. But aside from that, even if you have a patent, what you've done is filed a patent filing that tells all your competitors exactly how you put together your product. And so even patent information is widely known, and copyright information as well. So now we have all this knowledge. And so let's say that really began to open up around 2005. So that's only 16 years ago, but it's changed us as a species, and we have to think about the implications of that, because it's a major shift. It's a upgrade in consciousness. I call it the fifth generation of consciousness, along with Carl Jung, and everything is different, and we're all facing that. Okay, I'm going to look at some of your comments. Danny says, have you heard about Donald Hoffman? He has a TED Talk named Do We See Reality as It Is, for example. No, I haven't. And the answer to that is definitely no. We don't see reality as it is, because there are levels of awareness and consciousness, and the human species has developed in the evolution of our species, we've developed a way to look at the world, which is fairly superficial. However, some adepts like Carl Jung have penetrated deeper, and that's what I've been about for 20 years as I've been doing this work. And one says, hi Skip, great book review yesterday. I was young, knowing that I know now, I would consume life instead of retreated from the world. Now I feel regretful, very sad. Thank you, Danny. I really appreciate that. Your gift. I definitely appreciate that. And when I would say that is sort of the malaise of our time, and it's understandable. So let's talk about chaos and reflection. So my little red ball here, as most of you know, is a metaphor for the chaos of the world. And, if you were my first ancestor to come to the New World in 1625 and went up in the hinterland of New York State, where there were only 12 Europeans, and you started to build a farm. In those days, you would have gotten in a lifetime as much information as comes to us today in one edition of the Sunday New York Times. So since that time, we've just exploded the amount of information face. And that is a big problem for our progeny, for our children, and for ourselves, because human species evolved with having little information, and we had to step to get more. And people like the church. Can you still hear me? Because I've had a change in the timbre of my. This is all right. Okay, I had a change in the timbre of what I was hearing, and I guess since Jordan isn't with me, I don't need to keep this on anymore. Let me just check my sound preferences. Okay. All right. So anyway, all of us need to learn this skill that we're now faced with, which is to say, okay, there's chaos out there, but oh, by the way, we also have all the information of the world. So all of us can learn everything there is. And in past years or centuries, the church was the only people who knew more information than the peasants. And as long as the peasants didn't know, oh my God, they could control us, which they did. But now we have this information. So what we need to do is we need to learn to step back and reflect on what is happening to us and what the information we're being faced with really means to our personal lives, number one, and to our collective life, number two. That's extremely important. Let me see. And so, when we're growing up, just to flesh out this a little more within one, when we're growing up, we're wild animals. Basically, when we're born, we are wild animals. We don't know anything, and we start learning the same way as any other creature learns, by watching our parents and doing as our parents do. And we learn that what we look like, what our parents look like, because they're gods to us. And therefore, well, first we understand what our parents look like. And as I said, they're gods to us when we're under 5, let's say. And so therefore we learn what they know, or how they learn to be in the world. Okay, so what's the purpose of education? Well, we are problem-solving creatures. That's fundamentally what human beings are. And working up to maturity, to age 18 or age 21 or whatever age you wish to assign to maturity, we are learning how to solve problems. Basically, that's what we're doing. And then once we hit that plateau and move into the next stage of mature life, then we solve problems all day, every day, to the day we die. And so, first of all, we need to understand that. So we need to say, okay, what can I take out of this chaos that I can use in my own life, in my own project, if you will. And recently, you may have seen the video that Tim Holmes and I made called Skip Son's Persona, where I posed nude to Tim's drawing class. Well, of course, if you pose without your clothes on, the people in the room have nothing to figure out about you. Okay, they don't know anything about you except that you're, in my case, an old man, a fat old man, and so they have nothing. And so in the course of this hour and a half, I talk about something about me. And the result of that is it gradually puts information out there for the class so that they can react to me as a human being. And, one of the fascinating things that came to me when I was working up to this, because the reason I went to Montana, there's no secret, but I'm going to tell you, the reason I went to Helena, Montana for a day was that in February I was diagnosed with prostate cancer. And so the first thing that came to my mind was, well, I know a world famous artist who's become a dear friend of mine, almost a brother, and so I want him to paint my portrait as something durable that I can leave behind for my family in case my cancer is not resolved. And so that's why I wanted to go to Montana for a day, because I know from my own work with art and portraiture that the artist can't tell anything about you two-dimensionally, even if they talk to you over the internet. You have to actually be in the presence of someone. And so I was totally committed to go see Tim. And so on the 6th of May, I flew from Baltimore to Helena, Montana. And on the 7th, we spent a day together. And in that day was, among other things, this hour and a half period when I posed nude. And the very next morning at 6 a.m., I flew back to Baltimore. So it was quite a kick of a trip. I felt like I had been hit by a truck, actually, because I have a bad hip, and I'm 75 years old almost, and so it was quite a challenging trip. And in Chicago and Denver, where there are huge terminals, the connections were like a mile apart, as many of you know. And so I was relegated to taking wheelchairs between the planes, but I did it because this was so important to me. And I knew Tim understood what this meant and why it was significant. And surely he did. He edited the video that we made and we published here about that trip. And so we have so much to learn now as modern men and women, and we simply have to have a perspective on it. So that's what my little red ball is about, is understanding that we need to take our consciousness and remove it from the day-to-day chaos of life, which is represented by my red ball. And we have to be able to objectively observe what's real and what's not. And I intentionally wore this shirt today because the person that gave me this shirt is going to be here for lunch today, who was a former #2 in the U.S. Agency for International Development, AID. And the reason this shirt is significant is because it has this logo on it. And the logo reads, U.S. Embassy, Hanoi, Vietnam. Okay. Now, I have never been in the north of Vietnam. I had the South Vietnam tour back in early 70s. And so in general, I think it's sort of prideful and against my Pennsylvania Dutch ancestors to wear something that's like a persona that does not actually reflect something about me. So if I wear this shirt on any other day, it's like I'm pretending that I was working at the U.S. Embassy in Hanoi. Wow, okay. But today I'm wearing it in honor of my friend who gave it to me. And that's the only reason I'm doing that. I rarely wear it. Sometimes I wear it, but as you see, unless I told you that story on video, you wouldn't know it was there. And so that's one reason why I do wear it, because I use it. But anyway, but that's about persona too. And so we have to learn to deal with our lives. And to end one, I would say you've now obviously reflected on what was happening to you. And a lot of people do become withdrawn from the world during, when they're presented with chaos and they just don't know what to do with it. So they take themselves out of the game. And what we need to do is teach our children how to stay in the game and how to analyze the game so we understand what's going on around us. So Danny says, seen a video with a UFO that was filmed in the 80s in the Adam Curtis documentary, Hypernormalization. A couple of years ago, I saw the exact same thing with a SpaceX flight, the Falcon 9. I'm sorry, I don't quite get the connection there, Danny, because I've been yakking. But what I would say about UFO videos is, it's definitely true that U.S. Navy pilots, for example, have seen something. It's just not clear what those things are. And they could easily be drones or something else. And it's clear that people do see things in the sky that are anomalies. And even my father told me that, and he was a naval officer, he told me that in about 1939 or 1940, he saw what he thought was a UFO when he was standing on the roof of the garage of our farm in those days. And, I'm sure he saw something, but in the direction that he saw it, we also have Griffiths Air Force Base, which is a major base in upstate New York. And what he saw was very likely something that we had done. Just think about it. The distance between the Earth and the next possible star where life could have evolved is 24 trillion miles. Okay, it's 4 light years. That's and a light year is approximately 6 trillion miles. That's the speed of light times the number of seconds in a year. And and so far, we haven't found anything that can exceed the speed of light except quantum physics. And we can't explain quantum physics as yet. I mean, we can't explain it. We can observe it. We can observe what happens in the quantum, but we cannot observe it. And, we cannot experience it in our Newtonian world. Okay, so Isaac Newton figured this physical world out for us, or got us started. But the people that work with quantum physics work in hyperspace, in the mind. And so, physicists have never figured out what the unified field theory is. Okay, in other words, what field of physics laws, what field, such as gravity as an example, exists out there in space that connects the two, connects Newtonian physics to quantum physics. Now, from my perspective, this is my intuition, but I still think I'm right, and it remains for others to prove I'm wrong. I think the unified field is right here. We human beings are the unified field because we can see both types of physics. We can't connect them together outside of our psyche and outside of our, and we can't connect them together in our math yet. But nonetheless, we know that they are connected, and the only way that is accomplished is right here. And so I think the unified field is the human being, the evolution of the human being. But anyway, the point being about UFOs that 24 trillion miles is a hell of a long way. And, if we were, let's put it this way, we launched Voyager in 1976, Voyager 1 and Voyager 2. And they have been traveling ever since then, 45 years. And so far, they've only reached the outer limits of our solar system. They've only reached just beyond the Kuiper belt or whatever. And they are the fastest vehicles ever built by human beings. In other words, they're traveling at, I think it's 11 miles a second or something like that. But that's nothing like 186,000 miles a second, which is the speed of light. And so to think that there is a physical creature out in the universe that, first of all, knows that we exist, and secondly, could in any stretch of the imagination get here, is a pretty big stretch, is my opinion. And as Dr. Jung said, and I've read his 120-page book about UFOs, they are mainly figments of our imagination. It isn't to say they don't exist. They do exist as elements of the psyche, but there are no little green men that are going to come down here and laser blast you. First of all, they would have to decide that the Earth was worth anything to them, and then they'd have to have the technology to get here, and then they would actually physically have to do it. And we are probably a million years from having technology that would be anything like that. And I'm doubtful. So anyway, N1 says, but I was always an introvert and saw the world differently from everyone else. Yes, okay. I've been a lifelong introvert, and I definitely see the world differently from everybody else, as everybody knows. And so, but the significance of that is that that's okay. That's the way we are. And so we have to, one of the important things that we have to learn in our growing up years is that that's okay. It's okay to be an introvert. It's okay to see things differently. And so Danny says, so guess it's not too illogical that they already had such SpaceX technology back in the 80s. Find it odd they can keep such technology hidden, though. Well, the internet existed back in the 80s. I used it, and my wife and I are the first couple in the world. Okay, this is a big claim, but nobody's ever disputed this claim. My wife and I are the first couple in the world to meet online and marry. Okay, if you ever find anybody that beats August the 22nd, 1985, that's the day I met my wife online, then they might, and somebody who met their spouse and then married afterward, let me know, because nobody has ever disputed me. And even if that claim is not true, they're not many. We would be in the first 5 or 10, certainly. And so the internet did exist in the U.S. Armed Forces, in DARPA, for probably 20 years before it went public. And the commercial internet, what we're using here, did not exist until the fall of 1994, let's say. My wife and I were early adopters, and we met on an email network called The Source, believe it or not. The Source, which was a precursor of CompuServe. And we, so I'll tell you the story of how it happened, or how I got into it so early. So I was in Japan, working in Japan in 1983, and we were starting to hear about PCs and the internet. And so I was thinking of buying a computer. And so the first computer I bought was a double disk drive computer, no hard drive whatsoever. And so the operating system worked on one disk, 5.25 inch disk, and anything you wanted to do with that was on the other disk. And at that time, Bill Gates couldn't imagine anything bigger than 640 bytes. That's where we were at that time. And also, I was in the reserve. I was not very happy in my marriage. And I was going to a reserve meeting every Monday night. And at one of these reserve meetings, one of my fellow, a fellow in the Army, but Army Reserve, but said, wow, I've got a PC and we can do this email thing and you can meet women that way. I said, that's interesting. We are hithered along by our animus, as they say. And so I said, that's interesting. I'm going to get myself a PC right away and find out about this thing called the source. So I did that in 1983. And Japan was just then starting a public network that you could communicate with. And so, believe it or not, I was customer number 16 in Japan on what became the internet. And so I was the 16th person. Today, there's tens of millions in Japan and obviously billions around the world. But I was the 16th person in Japan to do that. And I did it. I knew I had to get a modem. So I went down into this electronics area of Tokyo called Akihabara. And they sold all kinds of gadgets and gadgets. Something like Radio Shack, I suppose, except it was all just chaos, basically. And I bought a 300 baud modem. Okay, so that's 300 baud would transmit, I don't know, about 80 words or 80 bytes a second. Okay, and so it was painfully slow, and I started to fiddle around with computer networks. And when I came back from Japan, I found out about this outfit called the Source that had you could have an account and list 7 interests, and that would allow other people to find you and find out what your interests were. And so I put my interest in, and then in August of 1985, I sent out one of the first spams. And that spam was that I had decided to go to an international trade fair in Hangzhou, China. It was called the International Secondhand Machinery Trade Fair. And that year, 1985, was the second iteration of that trade fair. And so I was looking for secondhand equipment in the U.S. that I could represent in China, get China to buy our secondhand machinery. And so I sent out a spam to 35 people, and I picked them out because they were the 35 people on the Source that had listed entrepreneurship as an interest. And of that 35, 6 were women. Okay. And I said, I'm going to this trade fair in December, and I'd like to represent American used trade equipment. And so does anybody know any factories that are selling big pieces of equipment? And over the next 4 months, I did find 6 companies to represent there. But from that spam, that first spam, I had one response, and that response was from the woman who's now my wife. and she was working in Washington with a nonprofit firm who's called the Corporation for Enterprise Development, and they were trying to find a solution for the closure of the Brown & Williamson Tobacco Company plant in Petersburg, Virginia. Now, at the time, 1985, cigarette smoking was starting to diminish in the United States, and Brown & Williamson had 3 plants at that time making cigarettes. And because of the reduced demand of cigarettes in the United States, they had decided to close the plant in Petersburg, Virginia. And so my wife's firm was trying to figure out what to do with not only the plant and equipment, but also the employees. There were quite a lot of employees, thousands of employees at that plant. It was a huge place. And so she said, we're working on this, and so let's see what we can do. And so I said, wow, okay. So she had sent that to me by email, and so I went and looked her up on the source again and looked for her interests again. And of course, she had entrepreneurship, but she had several other interests of mine. One was yachting, one was entrepreneurship, but then she said Japan and Japanese language. And I said to myself, oh, I'll bet, because I had just spent 5 years in Japan, and I've had many people approach me and say they spoke Japanese. And I would normally just ask them, Doku ni benkyou shimashita ka, which means, where did you study? It's a very simple Japanese phrase. And most people eyes glaze over. They would say they spoke Japanese, but it was because they could say sayonara or something like that. So I said, okay, I'll bet. So the next email that I sent to her was in Japanese, in Roman letters in Japanese. And she responded in kind, and she sent me my dictionary. She used a word or a phrase that I had never seen before. And I said, oh my God, I'm in trouble now. And sure enough, I was, because 4 months later, after a book worth of email messages back and forth, I packed up and left my wife of 17 years and moved in with my wife, because she was it. And we'll talk about it at some future time, but she was the one for me. And after 4 months, I knew her better than I knew my wife of 17 years. And so there was just no question. I packed up on the morning of the 2nd of January, 1986, left my first wife, and by the end of the day, I was living with my second wife. And 3.5 years later, there was a little legal complications there, because I was still married. We married in October of 1989, October 21st, 1989. And we've been together ever since, and I've never looked back at that. But anyway, so if you ever hear of anybody that goes before August the 22nd, 1985, please let me know. Okay. All right. So, okay. So let's see. Somewhere here, somebody said, youth is wasted on the young. Yes, indeed. But also, that's the way we do it. That's the way it's always been. That's the way I like it. That's how I want it to be, according to Paul Simon, his words from Senorita with a Necklace of Tears. That's the way it is. All right, now. So Danny says he finds it odd they keep such technology hidden. Well, we had a conversation yesterday where I had a set to with one of my friends, because Jungian analysts keep Jungian knowledge hidden, and did keep it hidden for 100 years. Um, and so that's what I've been resisting ever since I started to publish about Carl Jung back in 2010, and even before that, because the world needs to know what Dr. Jung knew. And if we know that, then we can better manage our lives ourselves. We don't have to wait until things boil over and we're psychologically incontinent or whatever. But the world can be self-regulating instead of having the shrinks of the analyst community control it. And so one of my friends yesterday said, we had a very profound, I would say, session yesterday. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, please go listen to it. It was a discussion with the author of Ars Nova, the book called Ars Nova, ARSNOVA. And he told an extremely intimate story for about an hour. And one of my friends who's a physician said, I don't think those things should be made public. And I just reacted to him because, that's how the Jungian community reacted to the publication of the Red Book as well. Half of the Jungian community said, "Oh, pish posh! We shouldn't be showing that publicly because that's private information." Well, actually, we have to show it because so many of us have had experiences, maybe not as built out as Jung had in the Red Book, but many of us have had dreams and visions, and we need to know what to do with them. And of course, the Jungian analyst community wants you to come to them at $150 an hour and work out with them what dreams and visions mean. And I say, well, the hell with that, man. And so, that's why I've been doing this for so long. But anyway, going on. So anyone says the Western mind is mad. We are in a rush to get to some future pointless. We are spiritual feeling creatures, and we need that mostly, not a new car. Absolutely. And that's the essence of my dictum of the eternal moment. We're all in the eternal moment right now. And so just think of this, that we've all let's say that you are the culmination of all of the lives of your ancestors going back to single cell organisms. And so all of those ancestors lived and died so that you could exist today, because all of our ancestors did two things. They survived until they reproduced. Every one of our ancestors did that. And so all that effort toward consciousness that all of us are the culmination of is right here, right now. Okay, in this live stream, it's right here, right now. Just think about it. All of our ancestors, for the 11 YouTube followers that are still with me right now, and me, all of our ancestors lived and died so that we could be communicating live with one another right now. That's a pretty big thing. And so this was Dr. Jung's point about the eternal moment. And that is that The eternal moment is right now. And in this eternal moment, like the magician and the tarot card, we have all the assets of our future life in front of us. And in every moment, every eternal moment, we can select which things we're going to pick up off the table and use in our lives going forward in every moment. And so if you don't like your life, change it. Okay, it's very simple. And you are the magician that will change all the things, all the downstream things from now till forever. And you never know what will happen. Okay, so for example, I never imagined that I would divorce the first time. And, but the internet came up and the source came up. And all of a sudden, 4 months after I met a woman online, I left my wife and moved in with her. I moved in with another woman, and I've never looked back. And so the idea of what is it, this is the thing for me in my life, that is covered in the book called Ars Nova, which we discussed yesterday. So please acquire that book, go back and read it and understand what Dr. Manis is talking about it. What is it for life? And so what happened to me during that period of 4 months is that I realized that my wife now, who I've been with for 35 years, was it for my life. She was the one that I wanted to be with and not my ex-wife. And it wasn't that I didn't love my ex-wife, and it wasn't that I didn't love my daughters. I did, and I still do. And I was able, because I committed to my daughters, to be in a situation where today they relate to me on Father's Day every bit as much as they would have if they were my you know, as if I had been with them during all their upbringing years. And let's see if I think I made a picture. Oh yes, I have a picture of them. So it being Father's Day, I will show you my 3 daughters and one of my grandchildren. And so there they are. And I'm quite proud of them, as you can well see. And they're 3 beautiful women. And among them, they have 10 children who are my grandchildren, only one of whom I never have met because of COVID. But anyway, that's my Father's Day breakout, let's call it. Okay. All right. So Big Cat says, my life is a disaster. Youth is wasted on the young. Yeah, we covered that. So the Western minded, yeah, that's where I missed it. And I feel I want to run like a child and play again. We all do, you know. You can't get out of life alive. So we all want to be children again, but that's the way it is. Art, thank you so much. I appreciate your wish, Father's Day wish. Let's see. And Thor says, sorry about the cancer. Well, I appreciate that. I began radiation therapy last week, and my doctors said we're quote unquote going for cure. And as if you don't know, you should know as men that basically all men either die from prostate cancer or with it. And so you will get, if you're a man, you will get prostate cancer at some point. And it's very important, like all cancers, to catch it early. And so since February 15th, I have been going through a series of workups for the radiation therapy, which included full body bone scan and CT scans and all sorts of other things. And the purpose of that was to see if the cancer had spread, which it had not. And so the good news is that I have only this cancer to deal with, and radiation therapy can knock it out. But I caught it early, and not all men do that. And so my business partner in Kuala Lumpur told me that he has 3 uncles that died from prostate cancer. So for every man that's listening to me now, I urge you to make sure that you have annual physicals, regular annual physicals, because only a physical can diagnose prostate cancer. And once you get it, there's no going back. Fortunately, it's a very slow growing cancer, but if you don't take care of it, it'll kill you. So I'm quite optimistic, but one never knows. So life, I'm of an age, so life can get you. Life will kill you ultimately. Big Cat says, are there any activities now that give you connected feeling? Well, certainly this one does. This is my connected activity. And of course, even just breaking bread with my wife gives me a connected activity to her. And as most of you know, I make an omelet for my wife about 4 times a week. And that goes back very, very deeply in instinct. If you were an osprey, there would be 3 things that you have to do to keep the female osprey happy. One of them is you have to do something that gets her attention. So that's called a sky dance. And so you do this flying around, showing off thing to get her attention. Then you have to bring her a fish to demonstrate that you can feed her. And the third thing is you have to build a nest. You have to build a home where she can raise her young safely. And so those are sort of the 3 responsibilities of males. This is why in the bird world, for example, it's the men that are the colorful ones, because they evolved all that color so that they could attract the attention of the females. So let's see. So, yep, we're all today. N1 says I'm 60, but still young looking and healthy. Bonus. Yeah, absolutely. And as they say, 60 is the new 40. And so I'm, at some level, I still think of myself as the 18-year-old, but I definitely not. My undercarriage is crumbling. One of the things that I did make a sacrifice in the Marine Corps for my country, and that was I sacrificed my legs. And if you're a ground pounder, you're sacrificing your legs, just so you know. And what that means 50 years on is that I've had 2 joint replacements, an ankle and a knee, and probably in September I'll have a hip replacement. And so, all that goes back to running around in the 1960s in combat boots at Marine Corps Base Quantico. Let's see. Right, okay. Danny says, aliens being capable to travel to here should also be capable to do it without us noticing them. Absolutely. So it doesn't make sense we could be able to spot them unless they want it. Yeah, I agree entirely with that. Big Cat, I feel I want to buy a rucksack and just walk and travel, but that takes a financial situation, but we'll see. Yeah, well, if you put that as an objective, you will do it. Big Cat, can you take a smaller trip? Yeah. Okay, Manuela. Hi, Manuela. Good to see you. It's been a while. I hope you're well, and I look forward to you coming back to our advanced group. Let's see. Unfortunately, when I hit the down arrow, then I lose where I am on the chat. Let's see. Okay. So I look forward to seeing you again when you have time. Big Cat, I don't give humans much credit. As far as I am concerned, we're just nutty, clever apes. Well, a lot of us are knuckleheads, and the knuckleheads are in control of the United States right now, one way or another. And we have to evolve to the next level of consciousness. And that is requiring much pain. In the U.S., that involves multiple murders, gun violence every weekend, and we have to just wake up. And so, but this is the way as a species we learn. We have to have enough pain that causes us to wake up and change our behavior. Tor says, there could be more clever species that have developed here, living in the oceans or the moon. Yeah, after a fashion, I agree with that. Danny says, alien abduction probably have to do with sleep paralysis. Well, I don't know if they have to do with sleep paralysis, but I do think that they have to do with dreams and visioning. And, because all the aliens tend to look alike, that image of the aliens is probably deeply embedded in our psyches, is my guess. So Sean says different frequencies resonate on ET frequencies, and you'll see the invisible light spectrum. Yeah, and cryptochrome is a good example. Yeah, I mean, look, we're all walking around carrying a cell phone, and we all have unique cell phone numbers that require a unique frequency. So the implication of that, the inference from that, is that there are frequencies that are passing through our bodies every day, tens of thousands of them that we have no concept of. We are not aware that they're even present, and yet they control our lives. And so there's so much that we can't see that also affects us, that we just have to wake up and pay attention so that it doesn't control us. Um, so let's see. So Big Cat says we filter reality through our human biology. There are probably much more in reality than we can perceive, but any extrasensory reality is just speculation. And Danny responds, yep, that's a good point. Well, actually, it's not speculation because, there's plenty that we can't sense with our five senses that we know exist for sure. It's not speculation at all. Otherwise, you wouldn't have a cell phone. And so that's not speculation at all. And there's plenty of stuff that's not visible. Even Dr. Higgs figured out that the Higgs boson would exist, and he proved it mathematically, but he couldn't prove it physically. And so they built CERN in Switzerland, which is a 17-mile cyclotron, I believe, which did prove the existence of the Higgs boson. So just because we don't see things doesn't mean they're not there. And we do know about a lot about things that we can't see. Big Cat says, I would not be surprised that time and space are filters of the human mind. When we lose consciousness, space and time filters disappear. And I, again, would urge you to look at the book that we were talking with the author about yesterday, Ars Nova, because he, one of the topics in that book, which we did not discuss yesterday, but I intend to discuss with him on a future session, is the existence of amorality and atemporality. In other words, in the psyche, there's no such thing as morality. That's a human construct that we write down in 10 Commandments, etc., but it doesn't have to do with anything that's in the natural world, except maybe an instinct to be rational. And the psyche doesn't care about time. And so the point about that, what Dr. Jung referred to as the 2 million year old man, but I now say is the 3.5 billion year old man, us as we've evolved from single-celled organisms. That aspect of us, which is unconscious, keeps us alive. Before I mention this, you haven't been thinking about your heartbeat or your lungs, and yet your psyche tells your heart to beat 72 times a minute and your lungs to breathe 12 times a minute. And all of that is done unconsciously. And so it's very clear that there's a major part of our psyche that operates automatically without our awareness. And it doesn't care about time or space. So, every so often, the psyche will present a cockamamie idea, a really stupid idea. And, this is where 1 John 4:1 comes in. Examine the spirits, whether they be of God or not. And the reason is that that aspect of yourself, the self, doesn't have to live in the 21st century. You do. Okay. you physically are living in the 21st century, but your psyche doesn't live in the 21st century necessarily. And so you have to be able to differentiate between what works in the 21st century and what does not. Your psyche will present you with all kinds of cockamamie ideas, and you have to be able to judge which are appropriate to you in your physical life and which are not. And so this is the whole point of individuation. You have to grow up. You have to develop a strong enough ego so that you can make those decisions. And then you have to decide. And fortunately, our species over millions of years has decided for what's right as a preponderance over what's wrong. We've killed a lot of people learning that, but now we do know that it's up to us. We have to make the decisions, and there's not some benevolent being out there that is God that's going to make the right choice for us. There's no such thing. There's God is being itself, and you and I need to learn to be a part of that. That's where each of us has a part of the divine within us, and all of us have to make good decisions based on what's right to bring into the world and what's not. That's a big issue. It's a huge issue. I've faced it numerous times, both in my writing and my painting, for example, where my novel is truly pornographic, and my painting is also quite explicit in some cases. And I published my book, my novel, but I did it under a pen name because I wanted people to be able to see what can come up from the psyche, and what, in the case of Japan, what Japan is doing to women. But at the same time, I'm not fussed that it's not a bestseller, number one. And in the case of my painting, again, something similar happened. I'm not going to go into it in great detail, but I did 3 exhibitions of my work in 2005. I found that I could sell paintings if I did that. But my psyche said, nope, this is not it. Okay, and going back to Dr. Manis's idea, my psyche told me this is not it. And so, or at least it wasn't it for me. It is it for Tim Holmes, my friend, but for me it isn't. And Tim is mature enough not to create pornography, which a lot of my art became pornographic, or at least many people would look at it that way. And so I decided to stop. I stopped. And so I didn't touch a paintbrush for 14 years after those 3 exhibits. And I only did it in 2019 because I wanted to paint a portrait of my Palestinian protege. But so I was moved to do that. And these are some of the issues that we'll be experiencing next year at our confluence. We're 5 of us, soon to be 6 of us, are organizing a confluence for 4 days next June 2022. It will be at the studio of Tim Holmes in Helena, Montana. And so I urge you all to mark your calendar and plan to come to our session. It's going to be an experiential session. It is not going to be a lot of logos. So, if you go to a Jung Society meeting in any city in the world, what you're going to hear is a lot of logos. Okay, you're going to hear a lot of words, and they're not going to be experiential for you. It'll be all up here in your intellect. But our confluence next summer is going to be an experience, and if you come to it, you will be changed when you leave. And we're in the process of planning that. It's going to be, I would say it's going to be a watershed moment. That's what I would say. So please do plan to come. So right. So, and when described a vision that he had, then Sean says, interesting how cultures from different parts of the world left the same art of ET origin. Well, we're all from the same origin, so we all have the same things in our psyche, and they have all emerged from psyches around the world, whether we speak English or Hindi or any other language. Bless, try reading all the books that were banned by the Catholic Church. Well, that would be a terrific, a terrific start toward consciousness, because the Catholic Church was censoring things for a long time. And, you know, what I have always loved historically is Galileo knew what he was doing, because he knew that the Catholic Church kept good records. And so when they called him up before the Inquisition and sentenced him to never look through his telescope again, among other things, he had to swear on a Bible that the earth was the center of the universe, which he did, because he knew he was making the Catholic Church monkeys for all time. Okay, he had the last laugh, because they sentenced him to, you know, he couldn't go out anymore. Of course, he was 70 at that time, and when in the 1500s, 70 was pretty old age. And they said he could never look through a telescope again. Well, he was already basically blind, because he had blinded himself by looking at the sun through a telescope. So that was no big deal. And so after, with Copernicus delineating a lot of things about astronomy, he went off into his seclusion, which lasted another 4 years. He lived another 4 years, and during that time, he invented two other sciences. One of them is quantum mechanics, and so he just made a monkeys of the Inquisition, and he had the last laugh, because he knew what he had done. And it's like Dr. Jung, honestly, he knew what he was doing, and he wrote his books knowing that his contemporaries could not understand them, but that somebody like me, and there are many other people like me who are not Jungian analysts, but have read his books, and you know, we've cracked it now, but 60 years after his death. And so people couldn't get it. They couldn't feature what he was talking about in those days, because the religion still had too strong a grip on people's psyches. But now we know, and as he knew, and we can move forward into a new stage of consciousness, and that's what we're doing. Let's see. Blast says The Apocalypse of Adam is a good read. Okay, fine. I don't know the book, but Sean says extra means outside of usual, doesn't have to be little green men's. Yes, I agree. Big cat. No evidence of aliens. Yep. NASA before the pandemic was already sending rockets up rarely. Now they are sending stuff up every day. Surely it takes a good time to make this stuff. Yep. And Blast says, makes sense that our creators are aliens. Yes, we're probably the aliens. We probably, our ancestors who were microbes very likely came to Earth from someplace else, but who knows? Sean, speaking of yourself, why the art left from our ancestors? Well, Sean, I think that one of the instinctual features of our lives is that we want to be seen. Okay, most people want to be seen and want to be seen to have done something useful. Obviously, I do, because I've been making this YouTube channel for this is the 6th year now, and the original thought about it was that my grandchildren are quite young. Some of them are. I have one grandchild who is I think 2 years old, who I haven't met because of COVID, and the others are ranging in age from 17 to 2. And so I wanted to have an influence on my grandchildren. And, for myself, I have nothing from my grandmothers, neither one of them, except their DNA. And my grandfathers, I was quite angry with them both. My paternal grandfather was an alcoholic, and he died at age 68. He had a stroke when he was 57, and basically that was the end of his life. And my other grandfather, who lived to be 97 years old, was the most bigoted person I ever met. And he lived with my family for 8 years. And so he and I were like oil and water. And it's only in recent times that I've rehabilitated both of those men in my psyche, because I've been able to imagine myself in their positions and what they were facing in their lives. And so I have gained new respect for them, but at the same time, I don't think much of their choices, because my paternal grandfather was like Willie Loman in Death of a Salesman by Eugene O'Neill, if you know that character. And as I said, 8 of my growing up years were with my maternal grandfather living with us, and he and I were we did not get along, put it mildly. So anyway, I suppose that's why I am as liberal as I personally am, because that was a reaction to his behavior and his attitude during the civil rights movement and so on in the 50s and 60s. Well, Big Cat says I'm a culmination of my ancestors and I regret it. Well, I wouldn't regret it. You've won the lottery. You know, just in your own life with your parents, you're one of 10 million sperm that could have fertilized the egg of your mother. You know, that's already winning the lottery. So let's not be critical of our DNA. We are what we are. And now we have to work out what contribution we can make to, you know, the further development of the species. As Dr. Jung said, we don't know where the spirit is trying to take us. And so if you can figure that out, that might be a big contribution. Let's see. Well, here's the way I think of it, Big Cat. Big Cat says, the Bible is a horrible source of historical facts and evidence. What I would say is, along with all other sacred texts, is that it is 100% true as psychic facts, because some human being had those psychic facts at somewhere along the line and wrote them down. And to that extent, they are true. Now, whether that meets modern historical writing, you know, no. But in terms of, and also a lot of the Bible is metaphorical. So we had early Iron Age men, and it was essentially all men, early Iron Age men trying to figure their world out, and they didn't have the tools to do it. And so it's true, but it assuredly is history. And so we have to understand it in a proper context. And well, Thor is talking about early stone carvings or paintings. I just want to, you know, I just want to remind you of this. Dr. Jung said that a mandala is an image of God. In his lifetime, the oldest mandala was found in Zimbabwe 35,000 years ago. Well, here's a mandala that appears on the roof of a cave in Kimberley, Australia. And obviously you can see that's 50,000 years old. And so there were mandalas quite well built out at that time. And so everybody thinks, okay, so human beings invented mandalas 50,000 years ago. Well, that's not true at all. And I'll show you why. This is a mandala that was found on the Sea of Japan. A lot of them were in the 1990s, and people couldn't imagine what this was. They didn't know what was going on here. And so they would, you know, find these mandalas on the floor of the ocean, and they couldn't figure out who was doing that or how it was being done. And so divers kept going down there. And after 4 or 5 years, this is what they found. The mandala is created by the pufferfish, which is in Japanese, it's the fugu fish. It's a 5-inch long fish that is poisonous to humans. So if you go to a sushi restaurant and they serve you fugu, you better pray that your chef, your sushi chef, knows how to serve it to you safely. I have had fugu once in Hiroshima. But this mandala is created by the male fugu fish, who creates this over a 5-day period. And then the female fugu fish comes to the center of this mandala and lays her eggs. And so in terms of the early existence of mandalas, this species, which is not full of brain power, obviously, but it has the ability to create this mandala. My biology teacher friend tells me this species separated from human beings about 200 million years ago. And obviously that the capability of making that mandala was there then. And so, we can talk about cave paintings and we can talk about cave paintings, but they've been in life since forever. Okay, I'm going to skip over some of this stuff because I can't get to everything. Okay. Well, Duchamp says, what if someone doesn't procreate? Is that a lost life then? Well, no, life isn't created when we procreate. Life was created long ago, and to this day, scientists can't explain it. They can't explain why there is life. They can explain some characteristics of life, like it reproduces and so on, but they cannot explain why there is life. And so, life is going to continue on, whether our species survives or not, no doubt. Justin says Spanish omelet sounds yummy. Yeah. Manuela, well, it says procreation is easy. Being a parent is different. No life is a waste. For good or for worse, you interfere and your acts have consequences in others, surely. And, I'm not even going to get into that tirade right now. And you should. Well, Dushan asks, are later generations losing out? And I would say that, light, the way I said it was when Nietzsche said that God is dead, what he meant was the God as presented by the Abrahamic religions doesn't exist. That whole line of thought, which is what Jerry Wright is getting to here, it's just going to die off. It's going to be in museums. I'm not saying immediately, but over a couple of centuries, there'll be very few true believers. But we will have evolved further. That's what I would say, and so our acts have consequences for others, very definitely, and we need to think about those. I mean, one of the issues in military operations, and the reason that the Myers-Briggs is taught in the senior schools of the U.S. military. I actually was taught it 5 different times at 5 different senior schools in the U.S. military, is because we have to get all the facts. That's sensing. We have to understand what the facts mean overall for what our operations. That's intuition. We have to be discerning so that we plan our operations properly, but then we have to be feeling, because we have to think forward and think about, well, if we do this operation, what are going to be the consequences of it? And I think in the past, we have not been that thoughtful. Creating the atom bomb, was that a good idea? I don't know, but we want to have military leaders, for example, who do evaluate these things in conscious ways, and to carry the idea, okay, so what if you get what you want? What is your be careful what you wish for, because a Marine Corps general can get you a win on the battlefield, but then what? Okay, that's the question. And so that's in the American military, we're very conscious of that issue, and that's why when you reach senior officer levels, they correctly train you for that, so that you don't make stupid decisions, or maybe make fewer stupid decisions, let's hope. Let's see. Okay, Sean asks, do I have any paintings or art of Salome? No, I don't, but it's not that I wouldn't, it's just that I haven't had occasion to even think about it. It's not like I want to have on the wall a painting of a woman that's got John the Baptist's head on her platter. Douching. Well, Big Cat says Kant killed God, but Nietzsche announced it. Well, that actually is not true. There never was that God. That was a fiction that was created by the Abrahamic religions, and so Nietzsche simply observed the fact that it was a fiction. However, in the next generation, Dr. Jung, who was a Kantian, found the living God where he or she lives, where God lives, and how God goes about doing the work of the Godhead. And the answer to that, the metaphor for how God does its work is the metaphor I use is bumper cars. Okay, which is a ride in an amusement park where all the cars bump up against one another and people try to crash into one another. Well, human beings have been crashing into one another for thousands of years, and that's how society has been developed. And so bumper cars is as good a metaphor for it as anything else. Yeah, and Manuel says many synchronicities had to take place for us to be alive, even the genetic lottery. That's absolutely true for all of us. I mean, our father met our mother, that was a synchronicity, and if that hadn't happened, we wouldn't be here. So, so absolutely. Justin says he doesn't know if Skip thinks we're shopping faith from whatever shelves, but I am not. It took 35 years to find my faith. And I would say that it took me probably even longer. But now, once you know, okay? And so when Dr. Jung answered the question, do you believe in God? He said, I have no need to believe, I know. And I had an epiphany the first time I saw that I too know. And so then I had to say, okay, what is it that I know? And it's a matter of experience. It's not a matter of logic or writing it out. And if you haven't had that experience, I feel sorry for you, but you likely will have sometime during your life. And if you don't understand what I'm talking about, then please look at my lecture called Finding the Living God, which you can find on the homepage of this YouTube channel. And there you will find a lecture that I gave on this about 18 months ago. Well, Manuela says she doesn't have the best genes. Well, none of us do. But we are very close to 10 o'clock. I need to excuse myself for a moment. I will come back. I'll let the video run for a bit here because I know you want to talk some more, but I need to have a bio break and I'll be back. That took longer than expected because, well, never mind. You don't need the details, but anyway, the lady who gave me this shirt is about to be here with us, and and so I'm going to need to terminate here soon. Let's see. Let's see. I'm just looking for anything else I want to comment on in this YouTube chat stream, and then we're going to call it a quits for today. Okay, Dushan, I'm sorry, I'm going to hide your response that it contains a link, because I have not seen that link, and so without knowing what's in it, I can't promote it. But please, if you want to make a connection between you and Just In Case or anyone else, please just go ahead and do that, and we'll and you can you don't need me for that, and right, apparently somebody asked what this background is, and this is Bollingen, which is Dr. Jung's house that he built with his bare hands, and so it has profound meaning. Okay, and I can't tell you all that meaning just like that, and so I urge you to study the works of C.G. Jung, learn why and how he built it, and he built it over 16 years in 4 goes, and this building is not electrified and it is not plumbed. There's no plumbing in it. And Dr. Jung once said that the person of the 16th century, the only thing that they would find in that building that they were not familiar with would be the matches. And the reason that he built it basically was that he found that he could put himself in his own self most easily when he was in that basic environment, and when he was out of the sort of the chaos of the family life, where there were 5 children and various lovers and so on. His life was quite complicated, and so this was his retreat, and so I urge you to learn more about it. And I have long thought that I would make a pilgrimage there, but I've never had an opportunity to do that yet. I tried one time, but it didn't work out for a variety of reasons. I think that it will ultimately become a museum, as Dr. Jung's original house in Küsnacht, Switzerland, is being converted into a museum now. So, so Dushan, nothing personal about it. I just have a policy not to promote links that I'm not familiar with. Let's see. Big Cat says he built the house while he was writing the Red Book. No, I don't think that that's so. He was writing, well, maybe the first or the latter parts of the Red Book, but the Red Book experience, the visions and that sort of thing happened between 1913 and 1918. And the Bollingen House, he didn't start building until 1921. Yes, he was still working on the Bollingen House during the next, 8 years or so when he was still working on the Red Book. But the experiences themselves came before that. And so well, there's a story about a Buddhist monk who's asked by his followers, when do you meditate? And his response is, I'm meditating all the time. And in fairness, I think that Dr. Jung was meditating all the time. And I further I'll assert that I'm meditating all the time. I basically live in my head. I have to do because my lower carriage doesn't get me around very well anymore. And so, when I do one of these sessions with you folks, it all comes from myself, from my unconscious. I have no idea what I've said in the last 2 hours from a conscious point of view, because it has all come from my unconscious. And, what happens is you constellate some memory or some thought of mine about Jungian psychology, and then I will express that. But I wasn't, when I got up this morning, I wasn't planning to say any of it. It just comes out. And I think that Dr. Jung lived that way also. So, but the point is, and let's talk about this. Okay, so most of you know that this is how I read books. Okay, we'll stop the cloaking for a moment. All right, so most of you know that I read books by underlining them and making notes in them. And that is my meditation. What do I mean by that? Well, it means that I will read a sentence. I'll read a sentence first time through and I'm just reading it. But then I say, okay, what does that mean? And then I underline it. So for example, there's a sentence here from Jerry Wright that says, God is considered to be love itself. Well, yeah, that's an important sentence. And so I want to highlight it. I go back and I underline it. And as I do, I'm contemplating its connotations in my own life and so on. So that's my meditation. That's how I do it. But everybody meditates differently. So if you want to be a hardcore Tibetan Buddhist, you can do that, or you can be a Jain or what have you. I because I think because I'm so intuitive on the 99th percentile on the Myers-Briggs scale, I've never had an issue with meditation, but I think if you were on the 99th percentile on the sensing end of that scale, you might have trouble meditating. You might have to learn how to do it and to learn the discipline to do it. But I've always found that I could just drop into meditation and drop out of the conscious world. And so, I mean, in that way, I'm certainly not unique. Being in the 99th percentile doesn't mean everybody, but anyway. Okay, so meanwhile, my daughter is calling me on FaceTime, so I think I have to terminate this session. It's Father's Day, and I'm going to do that. Cassandra, just give me a minute because I'm closing up a session. So anyway, thank you everyone for being here today, and peace be with you, and I'll see you next week. I'll apologize for having to drop out at this point, but we're past the end anyway, so it's okay.